Hello, I'm Aria, and I want to share with you the story of my parents' divorce. It was an incredibly difficult period in my life, and while I've tried to avoid thinking about it, I believe that opening up might help me move on. When I was very young, so young that I can't even remember his face, my father left us. That left me in the care of my mother, Violet. She was a kind mother but distant. We didn't engage in typical mother-daughter activities, probably because she wasn't sure how to navigate motherhood. She had me when she was in her late teens and was still learning the ropes of being a parent. After my dad left, my mom did her best, but we were barely making ends meet. I grew up understanding the importance of saving every penny and being grateful for the little food we had. It was tough, and sometimes we had no heat at home, so we'd wrap ourselves in layers of winter clothes to keep warm at night. Most of the time, my mother remained emotionally distant. She was never unkind, but expressing affection wasn't her strong suit. So when I turned 9 and was old enough to fend for myself, that's exactly what I did. I learned to cook my own meals, handle my homework, and even take care of my mother when she returned from work. It wasn't much of a life, but I grew accustomed to it. Then everything changed. My mom began dating a new man, Ruby. She didn't mention him initially, but when I finally met him, I noticed that he looked a bit older than her. However, seeing my mom happy made me happy too. Several months passed, and their dating eventually led to marriage. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I had no idea just how quickly their relationship was progressing. All I could see was their happiness and the love they shared. Following their wedding, we moved into Ruby's house, and it was nothing short of amazing. I had a room all to myself, larger than our old living room. I was running around with boundless joy. Ruby even took me to the store with him and Mom to select my very own bed. My new bed was enormous, complete with fairies adorning the headboard. We also went on a shopping spree for toys and visited an amusement park. These were things I couldn't do when it was just Mom and me, so having a family day filled me with tears of happiness. When Ruby noticed my tears, he picked me up and carried me around the park, introducing me to various games and even treating me to a funnel cake. It was absolutely incredible. As the years passed, I grew to love our new family. My bond with my stepfather deepened, and whenever he had time off from work, we would spend quality time together as a family. We'd have picnics in the park, visit the planetarium where he'd enthusiastically point out planets and constellations, sharing fascinating stories about them. Ruby once confided in me that he had never experienced a family like this while growing up, and all these activities were his childhood dreams come true. I couldn't have asked for a better father figure. Everything seemed perfect, but that changed around the time I turned 14. Despite our growing closeness, I never imagined anything could disrupt our strong bond. However, one day after returning from school, I found my mother in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. I rushed to her side, embracing her tightly, and asked what was wrong. She clung to me until her sobs subsided and then began to reveal the truth about my stepfather. She explained that Ruby acted kind and loving when I was around, but when I wasn't present, his true personality emerged. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My stepfather, the person I had looked up to and admired, was apparently a completely different man behind closed doors. He would raise his voice at my mother if anything was amiss in the house, hurling hurtful insults at her and demeaning her by questioning her worth without him. I was in disbelief. Every word my mother spoke shattered my image of Ruby. I had held him in such high regard, envisioning him as a kind and caring person who selflessly helped others. It was all a facade. My mother wiped her tear-stained face and implored me not to reveal what she had confided in me. She didn't want to deceive me, but she felt trapped. Not knowing how to respond, I managed to smile and promised to keep her secret. In the following weeks, I distanced myself from Ruby. I concocted excuses to avoid family gatherings, and whenever he suggested we spend time together as we used to, I declined. I could sense his confusion, but I no longer cared. I wanted nothing to do with someone who treated my mother in such a cruel manner. Then one day, Ruby insisted on taking us out for a surprise outing. We ended up at an amusement park, and my childhood memories came rushing back. Yet, being reminded of who he truly was filled me with anger. I told him I didn't want to be there. In response, Ruby tried to put on a cheerful facade, promising me all the funnel cakes I could eat if I gave it a chance. In frustration, I yelled that I didn't want anything from him and turned away. My mom intervened, calming me down, and I reluctantly agreed to stay for her sake. Days later, my mother approached me with a heavy heart and informed me that she was filing for divorce. She explained that she couldn't endure the situation any longer and didn't want me to carry this burden of anger any further. I felt genuinely happy for my mother as she initiated divorce proceedings. She requested that I attend the proceedings and provide my input on my stepfather, believing it would be helpful to ensure he didn't take advantage of her. I readily agreed, determined to assist my mother in any way I could. One night, unable to sleep, I went downstairs to fetch a glass of water and saw my mom slipping on her shoes. It was quite late and I wondered about her destination. Before I could inquire, she had already exited through the back door. It struck me as odd, but I assumed she needed some fresh air, perhaps away from Ruby. That was the only explanation that came to mind. I glanced out of the window, but she had disappeared. I thought maybe she had gone out briefly. However, it seemed that she had opted for a late-night walk instead. I surmised that the divorce must have been causing her considerable stress. That's what I thought. The following night, my curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't sleep again, and I wondered where my mom had gone and if she was truly okay. I slipped out of bed and descended the stairs. To my surprise, there she was once more, donning her shoes and heading for the door. I felt compelled to find out what she was up to. I put on my slippers and followed her outside. I saw my mom swiftly making her way to the side of the house, walking with determination, and I struggled to keep pace. That's when I witnessed it, my mother walking down the sidewalk until she reached a parked car. She opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat, where a man awaited her. As she sat down, they exchanged a passionate kiss before driving away. I was left in shock when I returned to the house. The next morning, I woke up as if nothing had happened. My stepfather was seated at the kitchen table, my mother stood by the refrigerator, and they both greeted me as if nothing were amiss. I struggled to erase the image of what I had witnessed, but it lingered in my mind, impossible to forget. I attempted to rationalize it, searching for any explanation that would make sense, but nothing did. I couldn't shake the need for answers. The next time my mom left the room, I seized the opportunity to grab her phone and check her messages from the time she had left the house. There was one particular number in the text from that period, belonging to a person named Logan. As I scrolled through the messages, my shock grew. These texts dated back months, and they all revolved around my father, me, and her life. They revealed how she had used my stepfather for his money and manipulated me to control him. She was aware of the close bond between my stepfather and me, so she had fabricated a false story to drive a wedge between us. The texts even discussed the financial gain she expected from the impending divorce and her eagerness to be with this mysterious man. I felt sickened by the revelation. Realizing that time was of the essence, I forwarded the most crucial text to my phone and deleted any evidence of my actions. I couldn't fathom what my mother was doing, and I was at a loss regarding what steps to take next. Despite her deceit, manipulation, and exploitation of our relationship, she was still my mother, the woman who had raised me. So even though I felt far from proud, I continued to play the role of the dutiful daughter in the following weeks. My mother continued to feign victimhood, blaming my stepfather for her supposed suffering, and I kept my distance from him now for a different reason, my shame. Then came the moment we were scheduled to meet with the lawyer. My mother and I dressed for the occasion, and as we made our way to the lawyer's office, my nerves began to surface. I understood why I was there, but it was still going to be a challenging ordeal. When we entered the room, my stepfather's surprised expression at the sight of me revealed that my mother had intended it to be a surprise. I sat down, determined not to meet his gaze. The trial commenced with the lawyers meticulously dissecting each side's desires. As expected, my mother requested a substantial amount. Then it was her turn to speak, and every word that left her lips made me cringe. She began with the same fabrications she had used to deceive me. However, it was what she said next that left me dumbfounded. My mother alleged that he had physically abused her, claiming he had kept her under constant surveillance, effectively making her a prisoner in their home. She spoke of countless fabricated horrors in vivid detail. I could feel my patience wearing thin, and I glanced over at my stepfather, who appeared both astonished and saddened by these false accusations. I tried to tug on my mother's dress to make her stop, but she pushed me away, leaving me unable to endure it any longer. I stood up and shouted at her to be silent. She turned to me, insisting that they needed to hear the truth, and that's when I lost my composure. I retrieved my cell phone and displayed the text messages from my mother's phone. I declared that if they truly wanted to hear the truth, I could provide it. I began recounting how I had read the messages and knew the real story of what she had been doing. Her complexion paled, and it became evident that there was little more to be said. My mother had been exposed as a liar, and my stepfather's lawyer capitalized on the evidence. When it was all said and done, I approached my stepfather and apologized for my previous treatment of him. Tears streamed down my face, and I had feared he might harbor resentment towards me. Instead, he embraced me and extended an apology for making me endure this ordeal alone. Regrettably, that was the last time I saw him. Following the divorce, my mother was forced to leave, and I chose to go with her. We relocated to a small apartment far away from him. I knew my stepfather wanted to remain a part of my life, but my mother adamantly refused to allow me any contact with him. I was hurt by this decision, but I held no regrets for the actions I had taken. Even though I no longer had the privilege of seeing my stepfather, I wished him nothing but the best. Our time together had been brief, but he had been the best father figure I could have ever hoped for.